You know what's weird about love? People act like it's simple. Like you fall in love, you get married, and life just magically works itself out. But it doesn't. At least, not the way I thought it would. And now, at 37, I'm living proof that mistakes, no matter how small or long ago, can come back to ruin everything. My name's Vanessa, and my husband, Mark, just handed me divorce papers last month. 16 years of marriage, gone. Not because I suddenly stopped loving him. Not because he found someone younger or more exciting. No, it's because of something that happened back when we were basically kids, when we were 23, and had no idea what marriage actually meant. Mark remembers everything. Every whispered fight, every laugh, every careless word that slipped out in a moment of frustration. Most people think that's romantic, but when someone has a memory like a steel trap and refuses to forget, it's more like living under constant judgment. We got married too young, sure. Both of us came from families that were, let's just say, less than perfect. Mark's mother was a control freak who micromanaged everything from his chores to his friends. My dad, well, he was emotionally absent, wrapped up in his work and his own frustrations. So when we found each other, it felt like salvation. Someone who understood our chaos. At first, marriage felt magical. We moved into a tiny apartment, both of us thrilled to have our own place. But it didn't take long for the cracks to appear. Mark had this obsession with fixing everything, not just me, but life itself. Counseling, books on emotional intelligence, weekend retreats. I followed along because I loved him, but honestly? Half the time I was just nodding while scrolling through my phone, feeling suffocated by all the self-improvement lectures. By year 3, I was restless. All my friends were getting promotions, buying homes, starting families. And there I was, stuck in an apartment filled with therapy books and Mark's relentless plans for self-growth. We agreed kids would come around the 5-year mark, but I was already feeling like I was falling behind. Watching life happen to everyone else while we were stuck in emotional seminars was exhausting. Then came Ryan, Mark's coworker. He'd visit our apartment for drinks or to borrow something, and suddenly, I felt alive again. Ryan laughed at my jokes. He noticed the little things, my new haircut, the outfit I'd worn for fun. Mark, he never noticed me anymore. He noticed my flaws, my emotional triggers, my inability to do my homework from counseling. Ryan made me feel human. It started innocently. Coffee after work, a casual hug that lingered a second too long. One night, after Mark had worked late, Ryan kissed me. And it was electric, the kind of kiss that reminds you you're alive, that you're desirable, that you're more than someone's project. I told myself it would be a one-time mistake. But the secret was intoxicating. Every message from Ryan felt like a spark in a dark room. Ryan wasn't looking for love, just excitement. And Mark was completely unaware, lost in his world of self-improvement and checklists. I was juggling the thrill of Ryan and the obligations of my marriage, and for a while, it felt like I could have it all. Until it got complicated. Ryan started pulling away, and instead of stopping, I met Nathan. Nathan seemed grounded, successful, attentive, the exact opposite of Mark's perfection-obsessed intensity. I fell into his world quickly, balancing 2 secret lives while pretending to be the dutiful wife at home. The tipping point came when Mark noticed small things, the way I'd flinch when he asked where I'd been, the way I'd hide my phone. When he questioned me about a forgotten receipt for emergency contraception, the illusion crumbled. Mark confronted me calmly, methodically, turning into someone I barely recognized. Screenshots, texts, timelines, he unearthed everything. I admitted to Ryan first, hoping it would be enough. Then Nathan. Watching the recognition dawn on Mark's face was terrifying. It wasn't anger, not at first. It was calculation, cold and deliberate. He wasn't yelling, he was assessing, cataloging, proving what he already knew deep down. My mistakes weren't just mistakes, they were a betrayal that cut deep. And yet, somehow, after all the shock, the fear, the humiliation, there was a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, I didn't have to lie. But that relief came with guilt, anxiety, and a heavy dose of reality. I'd planted the seeds of destruction when we were just 23, and now, 16 years later, they had grown into a full-blown storm. Mark decided he wanted to work through it, but it was never really the same. Every day, every conversation, every touch reminded him of that betrayal. I tried to apologize, to rebuild, but apologies can't erase memories, and apparently, they can't erase me being human either. After the confrontation with Mark, our marriage didn't collapse overnight. It just changed. Slowly, subtly, like a house with termites you didn't notice until the floorboards start to sag. We went to couples counseling, mostly because Mark insisted. The therapist talked endlessly about trust, accountability, and rebuilding, but every session felt like a spotlight on my failures. No matter how I phrased it, no matter how remorseful I sounded, Mark's disappointment was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. I wanted to believe we could start fresh. I really did. For a while, I convinced myself that Mark's intensity was just a phase, that once we had a child, once life demanded more from both of us, things would normalize. And for a moment, they almost did. When I found out I was pregnant with our son, Liam, there was a strange mix of joy and fear. Joy because he was ours, because children have this way of softening even the sharpest edges of a fractured relationship. Fear because I knew, deep down, that the betrayal I'd committed years ago hadn't disappeared. It was a shadow that followed us, and I didn't know if it would ever lift. Mark threw himself into preparation for Liam like he'd been preparing for this his entire life. Books, classes, schedules, plans, he was meticulous. I tried to keep up, but it was impossible. It felt like he was building a fortress around our son and me, one where my past sins couldn't exist. And in a way, that's exactly what he was doing, shielding Liam from the mistakes of his mother while holding me at arm's length, silently measuring my worth. Liam was born healthy, with these wide, curious eyes that instantly melted the tension in the room. I loved him fiercely, and I threw myself into motherhood, thinking that if I could be perfect for him, maybe that would atone for my past. But perfection isn't something you can conjure. Mark, meanwhile, didn't trust my ability to be perfect, and his constant oversight made even the simplest interactions feel like tests I might fail. For years, our home existed in this strange, tense equilibrium. Mark never brought up Ryan or Nathan again, but every interaction carried an unspoken weight. Little comments, sideways glances, subtle digs disguised as advice, they were reminders that my past had never been forgiven. I understood it rationally, but emotionally, it felt like being trapped under a permanent microscope. As Liam grew, Mark became the fun parent by default. Because I was constantly under scrutiny, he had the freedom to step back, to enjoy moments without the shadow of suspicion looming over him. Birthday parties, school events, weekend trips, he was charming, present, and seemingly unburdened. And I was constantly aware that every smile I gave, every laugh I shared, was being weighed against a standard I could never reach. The friends and family around us didn't help. Mark's relatives quietly applauded his patience, while my own circle treated me like a cautionary tale. "At least he's giving you another chance," they'd say, as if the last 16 years of my life had been a slow-motion punishment. I felt like I was living in a world that refused to let me forget, where every interaction reminded me that I'd been labeled and trapped by my own mistakes. By the time Liam turned 8, the tension inside our home had become almost unbearable. Mark's withdrawal had deepened, his patience wearing thinner each year. I started noticing that he was quieter at dinner, less inclined to share his thoughts or jokes. Every attempt at intimacy became awkward, like walking through a minefield where one wrong move could trigger resentment or judgment. I tried to rekindle what we had, to remind him, and myself, why we fell in love in the first place. Weekend getaways, late-night conversations, even small gestures like leaving notes in his briefcase. But the effort always felt like a balancing act, and no matter what I did, the shadow of the past loomed too large. Then came the moment that broke the fragile illusion of stability. Liam, curious and perceptive in ways children are, asked me why his father seemed sad all the time. It wasn't a casual observation, it was a question that pierced straight to the heart of our marriage. Mark had become emotionally distant over the months, working longer hours, retreating into routines, barely talking unless it was logistical. Liam's question was like a flare shot into the night, exposing everything I had tried to hide. I confronted Mark on our anniversary. We were supposed to go to a dinner at our favorite restaurant, but he seemed disinterested, detached, like the tradition was a chore rather than a celebration. I asked him directly, "Do you even want to be married to me anymore?" He didn't answer immediately. He just stared, eyes steady, unreadable. Then, finally, he spoke words that would haunt me forever. I'd been asking myself that same question every day for 12 years. Everything poured out after that. His confession was a tidal wave, he had never truly forgiven me. That entire time, every day since the affairs, he had lived alongside a stranger wearing my face. He had tried therapy, medication, spiritual counseling, everything, but he couldn't move past what I had done. He was exhausted, frustrated, and done pretending that our marriage was anything more than a carefully maintained facade. I tried to argue, to make him see that we had built a life together, that Liam deserved two parents who tried, not one parent obsessed with the past. But he wasn't listening. The rational explanations, the apologies, the promises, they couldn't undo the years of resentment he had stored. In that moment, I realized something fundamental. Our marriage had ended long before the divorce papers arrived. I had been living in denial, clinging to the illusion that time, love, and effort could erase the past. But some things can't be undone. Some mistakes follow you, quiet and persistent, until the moment they demand reckoning. After that conversation on our anniversary, I sensed the inevitable. Mark wasn't going to bend anymore. All those years of pretending, of going through the motions, of enduring my presence as if he were simply surviving, I had taken it for granted. I'd thought that love could cover 1,000 mistakes, but apparently, it couldn't cover 16 years of silent judgment. The first sign that things were truly ending came a week later. Mark started keeping meticulous notes, schedules, finances, assets. I noticed him taking long calls behind closed doors, quietly researching lawyers online. It was methodical, cold, deliberate, the same way he had confronted me all those years ago, only this time, it was for his own freedom. I tried to talk to him, tried to reason, begged for compromise. We've been through so much. Can't we just work on this? I asked one evening, while Liam played in the next room, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. Mark didn't even look up. We tried, Vanessa. I've been trying for years. And that was it. Just those words, so simple, so final. It was like the air had been sucked from the room. No yelling, no crying, just a flat, resolute truth that left me staggering. The next few weeks were surreal. Mark's lawyer reached out, and suddenly our home, our life, was reduced to paperwork. Custody arrangements, asset division, visitation schedules. Every document felt like a dagger, a reminder that my past had not only defined me, it had determined my future. Liam didn't understand. He asked why Daddy seemed angry, why our home felt different, why bedtime was quieter than usual. I had to be careful with my words, careful with my tears. I told him we were just going through changes, that sometimes adults need time to figure things out. But I could see the confusion and sadness in his little face. I wanted to take it all away, to make him feel safe again, but some things couldn't be fixed. Meanwhile, Mark seemed to thrive on the control he'd regained. He became almost militaristic in his approach to our separation. He mapped out every detail of custody, researched every legal loophole, and even interviewed child psychologists to prepare Liam for what was coming. I was scrambling to keep up, trying to maintain some semblance of stability for our son while watching my life unravel piece by piece. The house that had once felt like a home started to feel like a courtroom. Every interaction, every glance, every casual comment was scrutinized. Mark had transformed our shared history into evidence against me. Every misstep, every lapse, every moment he had never forgiven became part of the case for why our marriage was over. I started feeling invisible in my own life. Friends and family, once supportive, began to retreat, unsure of how to act around me now that the inevitable divorce had become official. "It's for the best," they said. "Mark deserves happiness too." And I couldn't argue. They didn't see the complexity, the nuance, the layers of compromise and survival that had built up over 16 years. All they saw was a cheater being punished, and I had to live with that simplified version of myself. Even simple tasks became exercises in humiliation. Looking for a new apartment felt impossible. Half the rentals were outside my budget, and the other half came with landlords who seemed to sense my desperation. Every phone call with lawyers, every meeting about custody or finances, felt like reliving my sins on repeat. Mark had planned this meticulously, and there was no room for error. Liam, thankfully, was resilient. He adapted more quickly than I could have hoped, but that came with its own pain. Watching him bond with Mark, seeing his laughter and joy when he was with his father, reminded me constantly of the price I was paying. I had wanted to be a perfect parent, a source of comfort and guidance, but now I was reduced to an occasional visitor in my own child's life. And Mark, he seemed reborn. Without me hovering in the background, without the burden of our unresolved history pressing on him, he became the man I once fell in love with, but sharper, smarter, more calculated. He joined new social circles, restarted his workouts, reconnected with colleagues, and even organized trips with Liam that I wasn't invited to. Every post on social media, every update in his life felt like a confirmation that my absence had created space for him to thrive. The irony was brutal. I had spent years trying to rebuild our marriage, trying to prove that I could be trusted, that I could be better. And yet, it was only in my removal that he was able to reclaim his life. Meanwhile, I was left in a small, cramped apartment, surrounded by the remnants of my mistakes and the reality of having to start over at 37. Some nights, I lie awake thinking about the choices I made at 23, about Ryan, Nathan, and the moment I first kissed someone outside my marriage. I replay it in my mind, over and over, wondering if things could have been different if I'd made better decisions, if I'd been stronger, if I had actually understood the consequences before I acted. But the truth is, nothing changes the past. Mark's resentment had been simmering for 16 years, and when it finally boiled over, it destroyed everything we had built together. I wasn't just paying for mistakes made in the moment, I was paying for years of emotional debt, of missed opportunities, of unresolved pain. And through it all, the hardest part wasn't losing Mark, it was realizing that the person I had been when I made those mistakes, the young, impulsive woman I had once been, had defined the rest of my life in ways I couldn't undo. The weeks after Mark served me the divorce papers were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and gut-wrenching realizations. Everything I had built, our home, our life, my identity as his wife, crumbled at once. The legal process was cold, methodical, and exhausting. Mark approached it with the same precision he had always used to confront me about the past. He left nothing to chance. Every custody agreement, every financial disclosure, every shared asset was meticulously outlined, leaving me scrambling to keep up. The custody negotiations were brutal, not because Mark fought dirty, but because he didn't need to. The law seemed to favor the stability he could provide, the history he had meticulously documented, and, of course, the fact that I had cheated 16 years ago. Despite my dedication as a mother, the label of cheater became a permanent stain in the eyes of the court. I had loved Liam fiercely, raised him, nurtured him, and yet the mistakes of my 20s outweighed 12 years of devoted parenting. When the court granted Mark primary custody, I felt my world collapse. Half the week with Liam, a single dinner in the middle of it, and all the rest dictated by schedules and rules that felt like punishment. He would leave for school drop-offs with a casual smile, while I clung to the fleeting hours when I could see my son. Watching him grow, sharing milestones, and not being present for them hurt more than I could ever put into words. The physical move into my new apartment was a punch to the gut. Cramped, expensive, and nowhere near the life I had envisioned, it forced me to confront the reality that I had no foundation left. Every box unpacked, every empty corner, every reminder of the life I'd lost was a constant testament to the consequences of my past. Even as I worked part-time to pay the bills, I couldn't escape the lingering shame, the judgment of friends, family, and even strangers who seemed to know exactly what I had done years ago. Mark, on the other hand, seemed to flourish. Without the burden of my constant presence, or my mistakes, he reclaimed life with a vigor I hadn't seen in years. He started exercising again, socializing, even traveling with Liam on trips I wasn't invited to. He became the idealized version of himself I had once fallen in love with, confident, competent, and untouchable. Every picture he posted, every update about Liam's adventures, every subtle brag about stability or success felt like salt in the wound. Meanwhile, I was invisible in comparison. I had a job, sure, but it barely covered rent. I tried to focus on Liam during our limited time together, but even that came with stress, coordinating schedules, navigating Mark's rigid custody rules, trying not to upset him with a minor misstep. Every interaction felt like a delicate balancing act, as if a single wrong move could jeopardize the precious time I had with my own child. Friends and family were no help. Mark's side treated him as the hero, the man who had endured my betrayal and emerged unscathed. My friends, initially sympathetic, became distant, unsure of what to say, as if my past mistakes were still more interesting than my present struggles. The judgment was quiet, polite, and relentless. Everywhere I went, it was clear, I was the one who had destroyed a marriage, and everyone around me treated me accordingly. The hardest moments were the small, everyday ones. Picking Liam up from school and seeing the excitement fade when he realized he had to leave after a few hours. Helping with homework and trying to bridge the gap that Mark's parenting had left in terms of my own authority and presence. Tucking him in at night, feeling the weight of the hours lost, the memories we couldn't make because of decisions I had made long ago. Even physically, our relationship had shifted into a strange dynamic of performative parenthood. Mark, in his primary role, became the source of comfort and stability, while I had to navigate a world where even affection could be scrutinized. Every hug, every word of encouragement, every moment of laughter was now filtered through the lens of guilt and accountability. Liam deserved nothing less, but it felt like my own existence had been minimized to a peripheral role in his life. I watched as Mark meticulously planned our son's life without me, school schedules, extracurricular activities, vacations, even social outings. And I couldn't blame him. In his mind, he was creating the perfect childhood, one where mistakes of the past couldn't seep in. And I was the past. Some nights, I would lie awake and replay the mistakes that had led me here. Ryan, Nathan, the lies I told myself about one-time mistakes and fleeting thrills. I had been young, impulsive, unprepared, but the consequences didn't care about age or intent. They only cared about truth, memory, and documentation. I had cheated, and 16 years later, I was paying for it in every aspect of my life. By now, I had accepted that some wounds never heal, at least not fully. The legal separation was complete, the custody arrangement set, and the apartment keys jingled in my hand as a daily reminder of what I had lost. I loved Liam more than life itself, but watching him thrive with Mark, watching the stability he provided, made me painfully aware of my own inadequacies, not as a mother, but as a partner. The first few months after the divorce were a haze of isolation, confusion, and raw emotion. Every time I walked into my tiny apartment, I was reminded that I had no anchor, no home, no life that felt fully my own. The walls echoed with silence, and even Liam's absence during the week left an emptiness that no phone call or text could fill. I felt untethered, like the years I had invested in love, family, and personal growth had evaporated overnight. At first, I blamed Mark. I blamed him for not forgiving me sooner, for holding on to resentment for 16 years, for taking control of everything I cared about. I replayed every argument, every confrontation, every moment I had failed to meet his impossible standards. But slowly, painfully, I realized that blaming him was just another way to avoid facing the truth. I had made choices that changed the trajectory of my entire life, and no one could fix that but me. Rebuilding was not glamorous or heroic. It was tedious, exhausting, and often humiliating. I spent hours looking for an apartment I could afford, juggling a part-time job, managing Liam's visits, and trying to keep my own emotional stability intact. The financial strain alone was a constant reminder of the privilege I had lost. The house, the lifestyle, even the small comforts of shared life were gone. Friends and family offered vague support. "You'll get through this," they said. "It's a new chapter." But words can only do so much. The reality was harsher. The world had moved on, and I was scrambling to find my place in it. Every encounter felt like a judgment, every casual comment a reminder of the label I now carried: cheater, ex-wife, failure. It was invisible yet omnipresent, shaping every interaction, every opportunity, every glance. Despite all this, I discovered an unexpected truth: rebuilding doesn't require perfection, it requires persistence. I started small. I created routines, established stability for myself and Liam, even in our limited time together. I found a therapist who didn't judge me, who helped me untangle the guilt and shame that had accumulated over 16 years. Slowly, I began to see myself not as a villain, but as a person who had made mistakes and was learning to navigate the consequences. Parenting became my anchor. Liam's laughter, curiosity, and affection reminded me why I was fighting so hard to reclaim my life. I learned to cherish every small moment: the bedtime stories, the weekend outings, the quiet mornings over cereal and cartoons. Even if the hours were limited, I realized that quality mattered more than quantity. I couldn't change the past, but I could shape the present. Financial independence was another hurdle. Working part-time meant tight budgets, long hours, and sacrifices I hadn't anticipated. I learned to prioritize, to cut out the unnecessary, and to focus on essentials. Every paycheck felt like a victory, a proof that I could survive, and eventually thrive, on my own. Mark continued to live his life as if nothing had ever happened. He excelled at being the perfect father, the stable partner, the man who had finally won the long game of our marriage. Watching him from a distance was painful, especially when Liam's excitement or achievements highlighted what I had lost. But slowly, that pain began to morph into acceptance. I couldn't change him, and I couldn't change the past. I could only change how I approached the future. Over time, I began to reclaim pieces of myself I had forgotten. Hobbies I had abandoned, friendships I had neglected, goals I had shelved, all of it slowly resurfaced. I enrolled in classes, joined social groups, and allowed myself to dream again, cautiously but deliberately. The freedom, though tinged with loneliness, was exhilarating. I was no longer someone trapped in the shadow of past mistakes. I was a person actively building something new. Yet the lessons of my past lingered, etched deeply into my understanding of relationships, trust, and self-worth. I learned that love alone is never enough to sustain a partnership. That forgiveness has limits when one partner carries unresolved resentment for years. That actions, both ours and those of the people we love, have consequences that ripple across decades. Through it all, Liam remained my compass. Seeing him grow into a bright, joyful, empathetic child reminded me that love endures, even when the circumstances are less than ideal. He didn't care about my past mistakes in the way the world did. He saw me as his mother, and that bond could never be erased. Today, I live a life that is smaller in material terms but larger in personal growth and awareness. I am rebuilding, piece by piece, learning that resilience is forged in fire and that self-respect is earned through persistence. Mark's life continues alongside mine, and the paths we once shared now diverge completely. I can't change what happened, and I can't control how others see me, but I can shape how I move forward. Mistakes don't define the entirety of a life, they shape it, challenge it, and, ultimately, teach it. I cheated, I lied, I lost the life I thought I would have forever. But I am still here. Still fighting. Still learning. And slowly, in the quiet moments between custody pickups and late-night reflection, I am discovering what it means to truly live again, not as a victim of the past, but as someone who survived it. Because life doesn't wait for redemption. It only waits for the courage to start over. And that's exactly what I intend to do.